Thank you very much. Hotel?
Hotel.
Bargani? I see so many friends in the audience. This is that just signifies how important this session is.
That's right. Yes.
First, my thanks to NCBS for the opportunity to participate in what I see as an extremely important discussion. To begin, let me underscore the significance of the session by referencing another important milestone. The year 2015 is the 100th anniversary of the publication of W.E.B. Du Bois' classic treatise, The Negro. Several scholars have appropriately characterized this volume as a path-breaking, Afrocentric interpretation of the history and status of people of African descent. Viewed through the lens of intensifying worldwide subjugation of people of African descent, the publication of The Negro was a momentous event in a centuries-long African freedom struggle. Du Bois undertook this ostensibly academic project as an extension of his political activism in support of African liberation. In many respects, these two ventures constituted an early example of the synergy between academic excellence and social responsibility. Moreover, Kenneth Goins wrote in 2002 that, and I quote, "Many of the ideas expressed in the book would prove seminal to later scholars such as Sheikh Anta Diop, Basil Davidson, and even Martin Bernal." Goins asserts that Du Bois' approach put him, and I quote, "generations ahead of his contemporaries," in the quote, by producing, quote, "an Afrocentric work where the history of Africa is seen through an African, not European perspective." Now, Goins' characterization of the Negro as Afrocentric, although it's appropriate, is somewhat curious because he seemingly ignores Molefi, Asante, and Maulana Karenga, two of the most important contemporary Afrocentric thinkers from his list of Afrocentric scholars. This exclusion provides a segue to my commentary. Specifically, I come to challenge overt and covert efforts to write Maulana Karenga and Molefi Asante out of the history of the development of Africana studies and to minimize their contributions to the enterprise. So how do we address these efforts to try to rewrite the history of the field? First and foremost, what we must do is to understand the nature of Africana studies. Some of you who are familiar with my writing know that I've tried to emphasize Africana studies as a self-standing enterprise with its own intellectual architecture that may borrow some elements from traditional disciplines, but stands on its own ground. And what I want to talk about is how the work of Maulana Karenga and Molefi Asante have helped to build that foundation. Now, as you heard, I got a very limited period of time, so I can't do them full justice in terms of talking about their contributions, but I do want to highlight some especially key interventions. First and foremost, both Maulana and Molefi have been absolutely instrumental in reestablishing African agency in writing African history. That is, to tell our own story in our own words and to interpret and promote African-centered cultural practices. This initiative is fundamentally critical for establishing the outlines of a coherent enterprise. Specifically, from the vantage point of establishing a distinct disciplinary matrix, Afrocentricity provides a unique set of disciplinary values and theories, as well as the foundations for an unambiguous observational language, that is how we talk about ourselves and our circumstances, and guidance in identifying and presenting examples of what the best of our practices and how we attempt to continue to struggle for liberation. Molefi's History of Africa, Afrocentricity, and the Afrocentric Idea, and Maulana's Mayat, the Moral Ideal in Ancient Egypt, Odu-Ife, the Ethical Teachings, and Kawita and Questions of Life and Struggle are a few examples of their work in this particular area that have been fundamental to Africana studies. Maulana and Molefi have also contributed mightily to the maturation of Black/Africana studies, and I use that term in part as a result of my dialogue with Maulana about how do we continue to reference the history of the development of the discipline while also recognizing the broad expanse of the scope of people of African descent worldwide. Molefi is, of course, well known for heading the first PhD program in Africana Studies at Temple University. Temple's graduates are on the cutting edge of expanding the contours of the discipline at various institutions across the U.S. I think Molefi told me that they have 17 graduate students from Temple here at this conference, so give yourselves a hand. The Journal of Black Studies, established in 1970, is by far the longest published periodical formally identified with Black/Africana studies, formally identified. The Black Scholar doesn't say Black Studies.
It's a Journal of Black Studies and Research.
Secondary, though.
Thank you, James.
Molefi has also provided guidance regarding the inclusion of Africana studies-related content in K-12 curricula. In addition to his leadership as chair of Black Studies at California State University, Long Beach, Maulana has been a guiding force nationally, serving as a member of the board of directors of the National Council for Black Studies for many years. Many times he has diffused inflammatory situations that the board has been involved in a manner that only an elder, widely respected by all, could accomplish. Introduction to Black Studies, the most widely used introductory text, plays an essential role in recruiting future generations of scholar activists. Maulana has also shared his insights regularly with graduate students and junior faculty through the various seminars and workshops hosted by the National Council for Black Studies that date back to the late 1980s. Together, Maulana and Molefi produced the seminal volume Handbook of Black Studies in 2006, which remains an important benchmark for defining the contours and content of the discipline. In assessing the contributions of Maulana Karenga and Molefi Asante to Africana studies, it is important to remember that the enterprise did not originate in the academy. The centrality of the organic relationship between study and struggle is reflected in the NCBS motto, Academic Excellence and Social Responsibility. Both of these cultural warriors have made important strides in wielding Africana studies as a potent weapon in the ongoing battle for liberation and social justice for the masses of people of proximate African descent. Beyond his academic advocacy, Maulana is the director of the Kawida Institute of Pan-African Studies, chair of the organization US, and chair of the National Association of Kawida Organizations. These bodies continuously propagate values and practices that are compatible with the ethos of Black/Africana studies. Maulana also writes a weekly column for the Los Angeles Sentinel that disseminates Africana studies-inspired content to a wider readership. The latest issue talks about the whitewashing of Selma and and what he calls the high official that delivered comments there.
That's what it is.
You can't mention Obama.
In a similar vein, the regular presentations offered through Afrocentricity International via the Molefi Kete Asante Institute for Afrocentric Studies serves a similar function in engaging the larger community in study and struggle in the spirit of Africana studies. On a personal level, my own worldview and scholarship have been impacted profoundly by both Molefi and Maulana. When I did my first sabbatical at Temple, Molefi was kind enough to give me an office and space to do my work, and I'm forever appreciative of that. I've benefited especially from regular dialogues with and feedback from Maulana. I thank him profusely for helping me to sharpen my own insights and facilitate my efforts to contribute in some small way to the ongoing development of Africana studies. I'll give you one example. I wrote a piece once on Malcolm X, and I gave it to Maulana to look at, and he sort of shook his head a little bit, and he told me, he said, this isn't like your other work, you haven't provided any conceptual generation. I said, okay, brother, I appreciate that. So I try to focus the recent work on conceptual generation.
All right.
So to both of my colleagues, I say Asante Sana for all you have done And I look forward to witnessing all that you will do in the future to promote Africana studies and to advance the battle for liberation and justice for people of Africana descent.
All right.